A national championship on a Monday night to continue to recap and react to live right here in person in studio on a Tuesday morning on the early line on SportsGrid. The Florida Gators, for the first time since 2007, when they won their second consecutive national championship under Billy Donovan, back atop the sport of college basketball. Florida, a national champ last night in San Antonio with a 65-63 comeback victory in thrilling fashion down to the final seconds of regulation inside the Alamo Dome over Houston. DRS, when we talk about this win for Florida, it was a common theme for the Gators throughout the big dance. They trailed by double digits against the Red Raiders of Texas Tech in the Elite Eight out in San Francisco. They trailed by 9 points with fewer than 3 minutes remaining in regulation in that game against the Red Raiders. They won that game outright to appear in a Final Four. They were trailing by 8 at the break against their conference mates in Auburn on Saturday night. They storm all the way back to win the second half by 14 and keep on dancing to a national championship game. They trailed by only 3 at the half yesterday against the Cougs, but Houston off to a blistering offensive start early in the second half. They extended that lead to as many as 12, and yet the Gators remained unfazed once again. Florida comes back to win by 2, 65-63 for the third ever national championship in program history.
And we talked yesterday a lot about correlation, right? Oh, well, if that game stays under the total, it's a Houston game, when primarily it was right up until the end of that here. So it's always interesting to watch that play out. But they were phenomenal down the stretch when they needed to make plays. And, boy, they had some blistering plays where it wasn't as if they chipped away, Ben. It was like, hey, we're up 12 points, and in the blink of an eye, here comes Florida ripping down the court, a couple three-point shots and one plays, and next thing you know, they're right back in it, which momentum will change. But understand this, too. You're looking at a Florida Gators team. This wasn't like, and I know Gonzaga hasn't won a championship. Well, they don't really get tested outside of one team in the WCC. Let's see them hit adversity. This is a team in the Florida Gators that played in the SEC, the toughest conference in basketball. And after that Georgia loss, which was a bad one, they beat A&M, Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, Alabama, Tennessee to win the SEC championship, the conference tournament. Then they take out the Norfolk State game. Back-to-back champions, UConn. Maryland, a rising thing. You know, Texas Tech, a very good team out of the Big 12, which had them on the ropes. They won. Auburn, a very good team out of the SEC, who had them on the ropes, and they won. And Houston, a very good team that had them on the ropes, and they won. That is just a sign of digging down deep and believing in your team. And understand this, too. Like, I talked so much about Walter Clayton, how good he needed to be yesterday. When your rest of your team can pick you up, as he said in that post-game presser, like, it feels great. Like, I wasn't making my shots. They kept us in it. So when I was able to get my shots off, we were ready to win. Fantastic team effort last night.
Absolutely was. Houston was ahead by 3 with about 3.5 minutes remaining in regulation at the under 4-minute media timeout. And Florida still found a way to a win. Only one made field goal for the Cougs in those final 3.5 minutes on an L.J. Cryer tip. And, of course, some great defense by the Gators in those final 2 defensive possessions, forcing Emmanuel Sharp into a turnover. And then, of course, on the final play of the game, not even a shot attempt up by Houston. 40 games in total this year for Florida. 36 victories. In DRS, the best cover team at the high major level this year in college basketball, entering the big dance, 26-8 against the number, ends up covering in their 2 most important wins of the season. As a 1.5 favorite in the national championship game against Houston, as a slight 2.5-point favorite in the Final Four victory against Auburn. This Florida team, not necessarily on the radar, entering the 2024 25 college basketball season. Year number 3 in Gainesville under Todd Golden. Last year, in his second year, led the Gators to the NCAA tournament, but a round of 64 loss to Colorado in a high-scoring game. They reload in the transfer portal. They add a couple of key additions, and they embark on this journey. A 60-1 price on UF to win the national championship before the year got started, tied for the 20th best number nationally around college basketball. But by the time they had reached the NCAA tournament, winning the SEC tournament title, the most highly anticipated SEC tournament that we can remember, at a plus 360 price. They had the second best number entering the big dance. And Donnie, as many, including myself, still wearing my Gator green, had picked them to win a national championship, feeling the Gators were one of the most, if not the most by themselves, dangerous teams in all of college.
No doubt about it. And the interesting part, too, is where you try to break it down and say to yourself, well, how did we get to this point? We always knew Florida was really good. They played in the SEC. They had some of the biggest wins in the nation on the road, at home. And the SEC, you're going to get those extra bonus points. But understand this, too. Like at the beginning of the tournament, a lot of people did have Florida winning this. But we didn't expect Florida to have this sort of route where every single game it felt like they were getting an absolute haymaking punch where no team can come back from this. It's not a 3-game series. It's not a 5-game series. It's a 7. You're done because you didn't bring your best brand of basketball. But when crunch time came, that best brand of basketball was the Florida Gators at that point, which they showed again. Look, in a game that maybe have up-tempo, where you have two teams that can really get after it, and let's just say the total, Ben, was 165.5 points in that game. Okay, they came back from 12. Like, if you put that bell curve on Houston, 12-point lead, that's 25 to most teams there with the way they play defense. And to win that game, I'm still sitting here today trying to balance out what actually happened.
It was a shocking thing. Much like Houston's rally against Duke in the Final Four, you're watching it with your eyes, but you're not almost believing what you are seeing. To Donnie's point that I think is right on the nose, you are not supposed to be able to come back from down double digits against this Cougars team with the way that Houston is constructed, with how disciplined they are, with how efficient they are on the defensive end of the floor. You are not supposed to be able to beat Houston when they lead by double digits, especially in the second half. And yet that speaks to the talent and the resolve of this Florida team, becoming the 10th program ever in D1 men's basketball history to win at least 3 national championships. And DRS in the last 20 college basketball seasons, excluding 2020, of course, because we did not crown a national champion. Since 2004-05, 3 D1 programs have won at least 3 national championships. UConn has 4, North Carolina has 3, and as of last night, Florida with 3 national titles as well.
Yeah, put them right back on the Pantheon. What's stopping them now at this point? You know the Florida Gators got that big NIL money, playing the SEC, which looks like it's the preemptive basketball conference now in the country. Who's to stop them? Maybe back-to-back for them next year. I'm sure they're going to savor this one, because if you would have told me before the game, hey, Donnie, I'm going to give you one score here. Florida gets 65, no shot they win that basketball game, and they did.
Well, look at the national championship odds already. The way to early look at next season in just a bit. But we will tie a bow on how this year came to a close and a national championship in San Antonio. Really the Big Dance as a whole. Next. Florida is back atop the college basketball world, a national champ again for the 3rd time in program history, the 3rd time in the last 19 years in the first national championship in Gainesville for Gators men's hoops, not under Billy Donovan, but in year number 3 of the Todd Golden era for this Florida team. At 39 years old, Todd Golden becomes the youngest head coach to win a national championship in men's college basketball since 1983. And a guy by the name of Jim Valvano, who also beat this Houston team. DRS will continue to give the praise to Florida here in just a moment. But, of course, with the joy of victory comes the other side in the agony of defeat. Houston ahead by 12 early in the second half. They led by 3 at the under 4-minute media timeout, and they had not 1 but 2 looks in the final 30 seconds of regulation to at least tie this game and maybe send it to overtime. Houston still seeking that first national championship in program history, playing in their first national title game last night in more than 4 decades.
It's so hard to get to championship games. Like, again, when we take a look at, like, the other sports designed differently, obviously football's a one-off, right? Because same thing with college football. But when you take a look at, like, hockey or, like, men's basketball or Major League Baseball, you say to yourself, and you're like, man, like, okay, the cream's going to rise to the top. 3-game series, 5-game series, 7-game series will be fine. Like, to win like 6, 7 games in a row and also have that grueling conference tournament right before that and then to come out on top. Some teams do breeze through, like, hey, man, won every game by double digits, that's fine. But the fact that you have to continuously come back for the Florida Gators is unbelievable. It just goes to show you it's not necessarily the players themselves, which, again, play a big part. There's the reason why they're on the court, but just the program and the principles that are instilled every day where there's no panic in these guys.
Yeah.
You could, hey, we just didn't have it on a national championship game. What a nice night it was. Oh, well, we took second place here. To be able to come back and dig down relentlessly. And we're not talking about 4-point game. Hey, we made a nice comeback. Like, they should have never beaten Texas Tech. No. They should have never beaten the Houston Cougars last night. And they did. That's fortitude of a program. So impressive to watch that play out.
I think you can argue that the most dangerous team entering the big dance, the Florida Gators, who had won 12 of their last 13, including that vaunted SEC tourney title in Nashville, did not even play a great 40 minutes for the entirety of a single game in the big dance. They did not cover in the round of 64 against the 16 seed in Norfolk State out of the MEAC. They were trailing UConn by 3 points at the under 4-minute media timeout in the second half. They were only up by 2 against Maryland in the Sweet 16 in a sloppy opening 20 minutes for the Gators. As you share, down by double digits against Texas Tech with fewer than 5.5 minutes remaining. And, of course, we know how Final Four weekend went in San Antonio for Florida, for Kelvin Sampson and Houston. Sampson still stuck on career win 799. He coached in his first national championship game last night, and yet he still does not have a national crown. Second most wins among an active D1 head coach, only behind Rick Barnes, who has 836 career victories without a national championship, fifth most all-time of any head coach with the most career wins and not a national championship. But DRS, the story of what we saw with Florida in the national championship over the Cougs was Houston over Duke, was Florida over Auburn. In all 3 of our games in the Final Four, 11 combined points. That was it. The entirety of the margins. Florida won by 6. Houston won by 3. Florida won by 2 last night in the national championship game. Third fewest points of a total margin in a Final Four in the history of the NCAA tournament.
All number ones, BSS.
All number one. And, Donnie, that was the point, right?
Yeah.
We talked about the lack of Cinderella, the lack of that March magic that we are often used to for a tournament often defined by its chaos and madness. We didn't get that early, but because of how great these teams were entering the Alamo Dome on Saturday night, we figured we would be in for a special and significant Final Four, and that's exactly what we saw.
Yeah, and it wasn't the prettiest basketball that we saw last night, but I guarantee the ratings are going to be high because what do we like? 2 number 1 seeds there in the final to get excitement throughout the day, and then a close game all the way through. Some people might have dipped out like they did in the Duke game on Saturday night. They got this one wrapped up. I'll get an extra head start on work tomorrow. Not the case in that one. If you stuck with it all the way through like most of us did, BSS, you enjoyed everything all the way through and just the crowning of a national championship and the future of what these programs will have. Because as you pointed out, the Final Four, both games were phenomenal right to the end. You watch the game on Monday night here in the national championship game, phenomenal all the way to the end. Sometimes just as a sports fan, as a non-gambler, that's all you can ask for, and that delivered in a big way. It was not a waste of your time to watch all of them.
No, it was not. All 3 games in the Final Four, the team that was trailing at the half won that game
Not supposed to happen.
Including in a national championship for the Florida Gators. They are the national champs in 2025. How about 2026? Look at those odds up next. 25. Last night on National Championship Monday inside the Alamo Dome, Florida back atop the pinnacle of college basketball as a national champion. Is it ever too early to look at next year's college basketball odds in a 2025-26 campaign? Maybe it's way too early. We do so anyway. Where do the reigning national champs, the Gators, check in next year's national championship prices? Not inside the top 10, DRS. A 25-1 number that is currently the 12th best price on the FanDuel Sportsbook, alongside a host of others, including Texas Tech, Michigan, and Rick Pitino, and St. John. So who is next year's national championship favorite? This year's preseason national championship favorite as well in Duke. A 10-1 number on the Blue Devils. Of course, the team could look very, very different from how it did this year, but plenty more talented freshmen making their way to Durham to start next season as well. Year number 4 under John Shire.
Yeah, here's the tough part about it, right? Because you do see a lot of clusters there, 10s to 1, 20 to 1, 25s to 1, because used to be, okay, who are they coming back as seniors? And also on top of that, who's that recruiting class? Yeah. Now that you have, obviously, the transfer portal, we don't know who any of these players will be. Like, look at Kansas, 16-1 price. Hey, they might be really good. I don't know who's staying on that team, who they're going to pay to come in on that team. That's what we don't understand. But it is fun to try to analyze where certain teams would be, and teams that we're used to not seeing up top, like BYU at 16-1, maybe having the best overall player coming into town into their camp for next year. But it is fun because you get a lot of teams, Ben, let's just say 35-1 or less, that if you know, I'm not saying like inside information, like I know exactly who their starting 5 is going to be next year. You hit it right, man. Price. Same thing we talked about the Florida Gators to open. Mike, if you pick the Florida Gators from jump last year and you're sitting at the tournament at a plus 320 price entering in it, it's one of the best numbers you're going to see.
If you have a lot of conviction about any of these teams, maybe you can get in now. Of course, you'd be holding on to a national championship for about a year, as next year college basketball's Final Four in the men's NCAA tournament will be in DRS's favorite city. That is Indianapolis. But, Donnie, these odds are going to change so much in the next few weeks. For these teams that just played in a Final Four this weekend in San Antonio, now they have to deal with the transfer portal. Players exiting, players declaring for the NBA draft, and, of course, those they hope to retain and then bring in through the transfer portal this offseason as well. We do think many of those talented freshmen for the Blue Devils, Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, Kaman Malawach, are going to go to the NBA draft. Who returns and who is coming? Cameron Boozer, the third best recruit nationally, and yes, the son of Carlos Boozer, who played his college hoops in Durham as well. Might have even been John Shire's teammate under Coach K. But regardless, Cam Boozer makes his way to Duke. As you look at the rest of those national championship prices, Houston will have some experience coming back, a 12-1 number on the Cougs. Louisville and Pat Kelsey in a very successful opening year there for the Cards. Already the best transfer portal class in the country as of this moment. They've been attacking it in Purdue with the man you see on your screen right there. Big Ten Player of the Year in Braden Smith. He is expected to return to West Lafayette, as is Trey Kaufman-Renn, and they add in one of the best bigs in the transfer portal in Oscar Clough from South Dakota State, who averaged 17 points and more than 12 boards per game. Donnie, I'll say this. Based on retention and what I know is returning for the Boilers, I think the number I am most confident in, if I had to bet it right now, would be Purdue at a 14-1 price.
That's pretty crazy at that point, too, because you take a look at the SEC. We're not expecting a fall-off from them. Look at the 18-1s coming in. Coach Cal in Arkansas, 18-1 Auburn, 18-1 Connecticut there out of the Big East, 18-1 for Alabama, and then 20-1 sitting there for Kentucky. And then, of course, we just talked about the national champion, the Florida Gators. So much money to go around now. It's going to be interesting to see where some of these kids actually wind up. But as Ben points out, right now you're looking at flyers here. Let me take a couple pieces for a team that I think is going to come back and I know has some NIL money to spend, because you might take a look and say, well, hey, I like Houston, and they lose 3 starters there and they drop back to 36-1. But you might take a look at like Tennessee at 30-1, get a couple key transfers. Now all of a sudden they're 15-1.
For sure.
It's a fun market. It's almost like the stock market this early because you don't know how it's going to play off. You're just trying to take a really good, educated guess.
Yes, you certainly are. Again, Florida last year, outside of the top 20 when it came to their national championship price right before the season began at a 60-1 number. Those teams this year, Iowa, now under Ben McCollum, who, of course, comes over from Drake. Wisconsin, Greg Gard of the Badgers, already attacking the transfer portal. Oregon, Texas, and how about the return of Villanova, now under the stewardship of Kevin Willard on the main line, the Wildcats at a 60-1 price. Donnie, there might be a bunch of teams that you see at the top. All right, Duke, Houston, Louisville, okay, they've got the resurgence under Pat Kelsey. We talked about Purdue, last year's national runner-ups. Kansas and BYU? Tied for the 5th best price to win a national championship? You bet your bottom dollar. A very successful debut season in Provo for Kevin Young. And coming to Provo next year, A.J. DeBansa, the #1 recruit in the country that comes with a lot of expectation, but a prolific resume before he gets to college ball and a very hefty price tag in terms of NIL. BYU is willing to spend. We'll see if it pays dividends next college basketball.
And also, there's 2 things, right? Because kids do want to get paid nowadays in college basketball, and you might go to the highest bidder, but also at the same time, you want to be sold on a pro-style offense, and that's what BYU is giving you at this point. I don't think any kid sitting out there goes, yeah, I'm not going to BYU because of, I can't have, Pepsi on campus or caffeine or anything like that. You see the 3-point shots, and you see that offense has a lot of free-flowing mentality. You love to see that there. But it is interesting where BYU 16-1 right up top at this point. It sounds kind of crazy, but you're right. After that season, BYU was really good, and AJ was in the crowd there in Newark for those games, so he's ready to go right off the bat. Should be fun. Like the brand of basketball they play, I love that. It's almost like the opposite of the Virginias and/or Houston.
Right now, they have a lottery pick on the roster. Their point guard this year, Yegor Dimon. He was supposed to be a lottery pick and still slotted by many NBA draft experts and gurus as a lottery pick for the 2025 NBA draft coming your way later this June. But I guess the conversation around Provo is that Yegor Dimon might consider a return to play along A.J. DeBansa, which would be something sensational. So keep an eye on BYU at that 12-1 number. And, Donnie, you highlighted this as well. Of course, the champions this year in college hoops out of the SEC. The SEC was by far the best league in college basketball. 14 teams into the NCAA tournament, a record amount of bids for a single league. 7 teams into the Sweet 16, the most from a single conference ever to reach the second weekend. 2 into the Final Four, and of course the national champs in Florida last night. And you see a lot of SEC teams hovering around the top 10 there. Arkansas, led by John Calipari. We'll see who returns in Fayetteville. Auburn, an 18-1 price. We'll see who returns on the Plains as well. Alabama, 18-1. Kentucky, 20-1. And then the reigning champs, 25-1. That will be the price on Todd Golden and his Gators.
And also, it's so tough because the SEC, we know, and we're not expecting a fall off next season. Well, how good can it actually be? Can it get back to the levels it did this year? Quite frankly, so, because you see a lot of money being thrown around the SEC from a coaching staff perspective as well as to a player's perspective. But it's hard. Like, it's almost like you want to take one of those other SEC teams to start the season that you figure can get hot, because if you have an easier path to victory, more wins on your roster, that means a 1, 2, or 3 seed could be available, where you might be taking a look at a Kentucky team once again, like, hey, 21 seemed good. Well, wait a second, why'd they get the 4 line? Well, they have 8 losses in SEC play. Not their fault, but you want the easiest path to victory here. It's just fun to see where these things are lined up at the FanDuel Sportsbook and some of the value you can get down the line, but it's the Blue Bloods up top, man. Hey, we just saw Duke. They're really good. They'll be back. Houston, good. They'll be back. Louisville is the interesting one to me because they look like they were on the precipice of, we might not even have like a major Division I program anymore, and how quickly things change where they have one good season. It's like, yeah, you know what? Great coach. They can recruit, and they have NIL money. Put them in the top 3.
27 wins for Pat Kelsey and the Cards this year, matching the second best turnaround season to season at the high major level in college basketball, and with a great transfer portal class already. A lot expected for Louisville next season as well. I will make a couple of points based on the trends we saw in this year's NCAA tournament. 5 of the past 6 champions have been a 1 seed. 14 of the past 18 now have been a 1 seed. And something that continues to be the case, each of the last 21 national champs in men's college basketball have ranked inside the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll. Pay attention to that in December next year.